I never wanted the house. It came to me in a thick envelope sealed with my grey tant's initials, dark red wax, all proper and archaic, like the woman herself. When I opened it, I found a deed to a crumbling bookshop in Dorset, a key with an old velvet ribbon, and a letter in her narrow cursive. Time owes us both, Eleanor. The shop is yours. The clock will find you. That last line unsettled me. Not the shop, not the idea of moving to some windswept coastal village. I had nothing tying me to the city anyway. But that word, clock. The way she wrote it, as if it weren't just furniture. As if it were watching. I found it on my third day in the house, tucked beneath a moth-eaten sheet in the attic. Tall. Silent. Unmoving. Its wooden frame was carved with roses and serpentine vines, and at the very top, just under the face, a pair of winged hourglasses curled toward each other like they were whispering secrets. The clock's hands pointed to 4:17. Always. That first night, I dreamt of a foggy street. And a man. He stood beneath a gaslight, shoulders straight, waistcoat neat, but his face was blurred, like a painting left in the rain. He said only this. "You're late, Eleanor." Then I woke to silence. No ticking. No storm. Only the scent of old wood and dust in the air. I shook it off. I was tired. Overwhelmed. But the next night, it happened again. The same man. The same words. 4:17. And then, the third night something changed. I was searching the attic for blankets when a loose floorboard shifted under my foot. Beneath it was a brass key, curved like a crescent moon. Cold, yet somehow warm in my hand. The moment I touched it, I felt, watched. Not in a frightening way. More like the way a memory lingers just out of reach. I turned to the clock. Its face gleamed in the low light. Waiting. The key slid in perfectly. It resisted just enough to make me hesitate. And then tick. The world shifted. I didn't feel it at first. It was subtle. Like stepping onto an escalator you didn't realize was moving. The air changed. The shadows stretched differently. And when I looked around, the attic was gone. Or, no, not gone. Different. The wallpaper had transformed into faded Victorian prints. A lace doily sat neatly on a nearby trunk. The scent in the air was no longer dust but coal smoke, lavender, and something sweet. Outside, instead of cars, I heard hooves on cobblestones. And footsteps. They creaked slowly up the stairs. Steady. Unhurried. I should have been terrified. But I wasn't. I felt known. He appeared in the doorway, tall, dark-haired, dressed like he'd stepped from the pages of an old novel. He had kind eyes. Familiar eyes. He stared at me like he hadn't breathed in a century. Then he whispered, as if afraid I'd vanish. "You came back." He didn't touch me at first. Just stood there, drinking me in with his eyes like he wasn't sure if I was real. "I waited," he said softly. "I promised I would." My lips parted to speak, but no sound came. My heart was thudding so loudly I could barely hear my own breath. "Who are you?" I finally asked. He stepped forward, slowly, reverently, as though I might crumble if he moved too fast. Tobias Wren, he said. Clockmaker. Dreamer. Fool. His smile was crooked, like he'd forgotten how to use it. I looked around, then back at him. This isn't real. It's real enough, he said. You wound the key. Time listened. I should have run. I should have screamed or laughed or demanded to wake up. But instead, I looked at him, really looked, and the strangest feeling wrapped around me like a second skin. I knew him. Not from books. Not from stories. From somewhere deeper. A memory, half buried in my bones. I whispered, "Have I met you before?" He gave a small nod. In 100 different ways. In another life. And another. And another. He made tea. There was something deeply absurd about it, sitting in a phantom version of my attic, sipping tea with a stranger who claimed I'd once loved him across time. But the absurdity didn't bother me. It was the rightness that did. We sat across from each other in quiet, stolen glances brushing between us like fireflies. I finally asked, "What is this place?" He set his cup down gently. A pocket. A sliver of time, anchored to the clock. It only opens when the soul it's waiting for returns. Me. He nodded. You. I looked down at my hands, unsure of whether they were shaking or just caught between centuries. I don't remember any of this. You're not meant to. Not at first. Time is gentle with memory. But it leaves clues. His eyes searched mine, and something in my chest stirred a flicker, a hum, like an echo finally finding its voice. "Tell me everything," I said. He spoke of a girl named Eleanor with an I, a spirited artist who walked into his clock shop in 1887, arguing about gears and symmetry. She said my designs were romantic nonsense, he recalled, eyes twinkling. Then she came back the next day just to prove me wrong. They'd fallen in love quietly, in stolen glances and ink-stained letters tucked beneath shop ledgers. But fate of course had other plans. A rival clockmaker, jealous and bitter, cursed Tobias's greatest creation, a timepiece so perfect, so impossibly beautiful, it was said to capture love in its rhythm. But instead of preserving time, the clock fractured it. Eleanor died young. And Tobias, heartbroken, crafted a second clock. A bridge. A promise that somehow, somewhere, when her soul returned, he would wait. I listened in silence. And when he showed me the golden gear, engraved with the words, "When you remember, I return," I cried. Not from sadness, but from the strange, terrible wonder of it all. The days or hours, or moments, or whatever they were, slipped past in a dream. We walked through frozen streets that no longer existed, watched phantom stars rise over silent rooftops, shared warmth in a world paused just for us. He taught me how to fix clocks. I taught him how to laugh again. And slowly, memory crept back. The feel of his fingers brushing mine. The scent of cedar wood and ink. A kiss stolen behind a curtain of ticking clocks. I remembered everything. But nothing in time is ever still for long. The cracks came subtly. A flicker in the wallpaper. A shiver in the sky. And one morning, I woke to find the clock's hands moving. 4:18. I'm fading, Tobias said, as gently as if saying goodbye. No, I said. We just found each other. Again. But he shook his head. This moment was never meant to last. It's a hinge. A door. But doors must close to open again. I gripped his hand. Then come with me. To my time. He smiled. Clocks don't move backward. Not yet. Tears slid down my cheeks. He wiped them with his thumb. You always come back. That's the promise. I held him then. Like I could slow time with my arms. And then tick. I was alone. Back in the attic. No lace doilies. No scent of coal smoke. Just silence. But the clock ticked now. Quiet, steady, like a heartbeat. In my hand, I held the golden gear. And on the inside of the case, carved faintly into the wood, I saw new initials beneath my grey tents. F. T.W. I live in that shop now. I keep the clock wound. Not every day. Just the right ones. I wait for the moment it shivers. For the breath of lavender in the air. For 417 to return. Because one day he'll be there. And I'll remember. Again. After that night, nothing felt quite real. The world moved on, as it always does. Dorset's sleepy mornings, the creak of old wood beneath my feet, the smell of salt in the air, but I moved through it as if submerged. A dream walking in daylight. The clock still ticked. Quietly. Steadily. It hadn't struck 4:17 since Tobias vanished, but sometimes, when I passed by the attic, I'd feel it, this flutter in my chest, like something calling home. The strange thing was, the shop downstairs started changing too. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks. Little things. A book on the shelf I didn't remember buying. A teacup with faint initials T.W. etched beneath the glaze. An old record playing on its own, soft jazz from a time I shouldn't have known, yet somehow, did. Then came the customers. A woman wandered in one foggy morning, looked around the shop, and whispered, "It smells like memory in here." I blinked. "I'm sorry." She shook her head, embarrassed. I don't know why I said that. But I did. On a rainy Tuesday, while reorganizing the back shelves, I stumbled on a small wooden box. Inside was a journal wrapped in velvet, its pages yellowed with time. The first page held a name. Eleanor Finch. But the handwriting wasn't mine. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the storm tapping at the windows, and read. The clock found me when I was 26. I'd just left my fiancé. Everyone said I was being foolish, but I couldn't marry a man who didn't believe in magic. Tobias was a name in a dream at first. Then a whisper. Then a shape beneath a gaslight. He said I'd been here before. That I was her. That I was you. I didn't believe him. Until I did. I read through the night. Page after page, her words stitched themselves into mine. She had lived this. My great-aunt, another Eleanor, had been through this very loop, one lifetime removed. The shop had been hers. The clock had ticked for her once. And then, It stopped. I let fear stop me, she wrote. I let time close the door before I could choose. I built a life, but always wondered if I'd missed the one meant for me. So I've kept the shop ready. For you. Because you're the one who might finally break the cycle. The final entry was dated 53 years ago. Just 2 words. He's waiting. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside the clock, the journal in my lap, the golden gear warm in my hand. I stared at the hour hand frozen at 4:17, wondering if it was enough. If memory alone could be a key. Tobias, I whispered. If you're still there. I'm ready. The clock did not move. But my heart did. Over the next few weeks, I stopped pretending I was okay. I stopped forcing myself to move on, whatever that meant. I let myself grieve the ache of timeless love and also, to hope again. And then one morning, it happened. I was sweeping the front steps of the shop, sunlight dripping through the clouds, when a man walked by. I froze. He was dressed in a charcoal coat, carrying a parcel. Brown hair, familiar jawline. My breath hitched. He stopped. Turned. And smiled. It wasn't him, not Tobias. But my heart still stuttered. He gave a small nod. Lovely morning, miss. I nodded back. Yes, it is. That evening, I returned to the attic. The clock sat silent. But something was different. A second hand I'd never seen before glimmered on its face, faint as a ghost. And it moved. Just once. Tick. It happened on a Thursday. Crisp air, soft light, one of those deceptively ordinary days. I'd just closed the bookshop for lunch. The wind tugged at the curtains, rustling the pages of a poetry anthology I hadn't touched in weeks. I turned to the clock. 4:16. I blinked. 4:17. Tick. And the world shifted. But not like before. This wasn't a foggy dream world, or a flicker in the attic. This was now. My present. My skin prickled with electricity, like the air before a storm. Everything was sharper, more vivid, the worn grain of the wood, the subtle crack in the floorboard near the counter, the distant call of seagulls. And then I heard the bell. The front door of the shop chimed, as it always did when someone entered. But when I turned, he was there. Tobias. Wearing a soft blue vest and a coat I'd seen only in dreams. No fog, no illusions. Just him. Just me. He looked older. Not aged, but real. Solid. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. Eleanor, he said, voice barely above a breath. I dropped the cloth in my hand. Tobias. We stared at each other across decades. And then I moved. I didn't even realize I was running until I collided with him, arms wrapping around his chest like I could hold the entire past in my grip. He held me back, tighter than I'd ever imagined. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. We sat on the wooden floor of the shop, backs against the counter like two children hiding from the world. Time didn't exist. Or maybe it did, but chose to wait. I touched his hand, traced the veins along his fingers. You're here, I whispered, How? He smiled, eyes full of light and sorrow. You remembered. The gear, I said, pulling it from the pocket of my cardigan. The journal. The key. I felt you everywhere. His fingers brushed mine. And you were in every second I waited. He explained how the clock, once fully remembered, would allow a single crossing. One visit. One moment in real time. How long do we have? I asked. He hesitated. Until the clock strikes 5. I glanced over his shoulder. It was 4:22. I laughed. Cried. Swore under my breath. So little time. Time is always little, he said, brushing my hair back. But it can be full. So we made it full. We drank tea from chipped porcelain mugs. We walked barefoot on the back garden path. He kissed my forehead and said I looked just like the girl who argued with him over clock gears. You said I was too logical, he teased. And you were too romantic. We danced, no music, just the ticking of the clock echoing through the floorboards. His hands were warm, sure. I rested my head on his chest and closed my eyes. I want more than this, I said. I know. I want all of it. The mundane. The years. The groceries. The bills. You snoring beside me. I don't snore. I smiled. I'd like to find out. His voice was tight when he whispered, I'd like to let you. 4:55. We sat on the floor again, fingers laced. I don't want to lose you, I said. You won't, he replied. Not if you finish what we started. He placed the gear in my palm again. This is the last piece. It fits behind the faceplate. The bridge isn't complete yet, but you can build it. I frowned. But how will I know what to do? He smiled. You already do. And then, like always, he kissed me. Soft. Steady. Like the first tick of a clock that's just remembered its purpose. 4:59. I walked him to the door. The sky outside shimmered like water. I'll see you again? I asked, voice cracking. He nodded once. You'll make sure of it. And then he stepped out. Just as the clock struck 5. I stood alone in the shop, the silence deafening. But my heart was louder. This time, I wouldn't wait for the world to turn backward. This time, I would turn it myself. I didn't leave the attic for 2 days. Not out of grief but determination. I laid out every part of the clock, screws, gears, plates, tiny edged springs, and I listened. Not with my ears, but with the quiet place inside me where memory lives. Tobias was right. I did know what to do. It wasn't that I understood every mechanism, I didn't. But my hands moved like they remembered. As though each life before mine had left fingerprints on my fingertips. I followed the diagrams from the journal. Traced the lines my great-aunt had copied in fading ink. Her final words played over and over in my head. Finish it, and time becomes yours. It took me 6 nights. On the 7th, under a full moon, I set the final gear behind the faceplate. It clicked into place like it had been waiting. And then, silence. No thunder. No magic glow. Just the steady, sleeping hum of a clock no longer broken. For a moment, doubt swept in like fog. Had I misunderstood? Had I built a memory instead of a bridge? I stepped back. The hour hand moved. Tick. 4:17. And the chimes began to ring. They echoed not just through the attic but through everything. Down the stairs. Through the walls. Through the street and beyond. And then the light changed. Not a burst, but a quiet rippling as if the air had become water and I had just stepped into the deep. The attic faded. In its place stood something familiar, something I couldn't quite explain, a workshop I had never seen and yet remembered deeply. Mahogany counters. Brass tools. Dusty sunlight. The soft perfume of lavender oil and aged parchment. And in the middle of it, him. Tobias Wren. He turned slowly, as though afraid to break the illusion. But when our eyes met, there was no doubt. This was no borrowed moment. No dream or echo. This was real. His smile trembled. You did it. I nodded, barely breathing. So did you, I whispered. He crossed the room in 3 steps. His arms found mine like they'd never let go. When he kissed me, the world sighed around us. And kept ticking. We spent the next days or weeks, or whatever time meant now relearning each other. Not just the grand gestures or poetic moments, but the quiet truths. He made awful tea but brilliant cinnamon toast. I snored slightly when I fell asleep reading. He was terrified of losing me again. I was terrified of finding him too late. So we did what anyone would do when time finally gave you back the person you'd spent lifetimes missing. We made new time. Together. We didn't hide. We opened the shop to the world again but with a new name carved into the window. Wren and Finch Timekeepers. A shop that fixed clocks. And maybe, just maybe, something more. People came. Some for repairs. Others for reasons they couldn't quite name. They stayed for tea. For stories. For the hush between heartbeats. And every once in a while, someone would pause in front of the grandfather clock, eyes distant, fingers brushing the brass face. I'd watch them closely. Because maybe just maybe time was calling for them too. As for the old clock, it still stands in the attic. But it no longer sleeps. Every day at 4:17, it chimes once. Not as a warning, but as a promise.